Everyone will remain muted during the welcome by President Johnson Hurt, her introduction of our guest speaker, and the question and answer segment by Director Suzanne Ellsbury. When the business portion of the meeting begins, again, everyone except the president and annual meeting participants will be muted until it's time for voting. Reports from action team leaders, remarks and acknowledgements by other participants. Now, please welcome our annual meeting parliamentarian, Beverly Lawson, who will discuss voting procedures.
Thank you, Vashti. The 2021 annual meeting program will be conducted in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order. Members will be voting on 3 items during the business portion of the meeting. They are bylaws changes, the budget, and election of officers and directors. You will only be able to vote in the affirmative by raising your virtual hand found under participants or reactions. It's at the bottom of your screen. An announcement will be made if the motion is passed.
Thank you, Beverly. A recording of tonight's meeting will be posted on YouTube. And now I would like to introduce the president of the League of Women Voters Charlotte-Mecklenburg, Delores Johnson Hurt.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the annual meeting of the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg. We are glad you are here. At this time, I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Jessica Lowe-Minor, Vice President of the League of Women Voters of the United States. Jessica has been a member of the National League's Board of Directors since 2016. She has extensive nonprofit experience, having served in administrative and public policy roles, including as Executive Director of the Institute for Nonprofit Innovation and Excellence in Tallahassee, Florida. From 2010 to 2014, she was also Executive Director of the Florida League. Her tenure there contributed to a 167% increase in revenue and a 31% increase in membership. We are extremely pleased Jessica is with us this evening. Please welcome her.
There we go. Thank you so much, everyone. And just for those who I can see on my screen, can y'all nod if you can hear me? Oh, good. Okay, perfect. So I am going to share my screen. I just have a brief presentation, and then I know that League members love to ask questions. So I left a lot of room available for us to just kind of have an open-ended chat. All right, so I am going to share my slideshow here. Okay, so I believe that everybody should be looking at a cover page that says Annual Meeting 2021. All right. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was, well, really to thank you all for the amazing work that you all did in Charlotte and of course across the country on the 2020 election. I know for some people, the 2020 election is still being litigated, but we at the League know that it was a historic election in terms of turnout, in terms of access, and part of that is because the League was just incredibly effective at advocating for the rights of voters in the midst of a global pandemic. And just to give you a sense, we actually filed or were participants in 77 state and federal lawsuits in 2019 and 2020. And we actually ended up having those 77 lawsuits were filed in 37 different states. So talk about the power of a national network. I mean, that's amazing, almost every state in the nation. And we ended up having a 78% win rate. And so in, 3 out of 4 plus cases, our arguments on behalf of voters were the ones that carried the day. And ultimately, through our litigation efforts alone, we were able to protect the rights of 25 million plus voters for the 2020 election. So that's a really exciting legacy. We should all be really proud of this organization and the fact that we were able to do that, despite the fact that everybody was locked down and working from home and working remotely and all of that, trying to stay safe. And it's amazing that voters came out in such great numbers. I mean, again, like, this was such a kind of contentious election, and it's easy to get bogged down in the bitterness. But the reality is that it was also historic, and that people did come out to vote. They did make their voice heard. And we should be really proud of the American people for the effort that they put in towards making their democratic voices heard. And so now the question is, where are we in the aftermath of what is now known as the big lie, right? That there was, some type of election fraud, or that the election was not somehow legitimate, and how is that being used really as a pretext to undermine voter rights? So that's where we're at now, unfortunately. And so just in 2021 alone, we have literally seen hundreds of anti-voter bills filed in 47 states. And so our work, even though we all worked really hard in 2020 and we're somewhat exhausted, this is the time when we have to rally, because essentially what's happening is that there was a story made up about the election not being legitimate in 2020. And then because of that story, state legislators across the country are seizing the opportunity to hold on to power and to make it harder for folks to vote, particularly folks in underserved communities, young voters, minority voters, voters for whom English is not their first language, right? There's just a wave of legislation to make it harder for those populations to vote. And those are the very voters that the League of Women Voters worked so hard in 2020 and 2019 to protect their rights and their access. So what can we do? Well, at the national level, you guys have probably heard about the For the People Act. It is a very exciting piece of legislation, and the League was involved at the national level in drafting this legislation. So we were at the table when different aspects of the bill were being written. And so we are very supportive of the bill, and it is an omnibus elections reform proposal. So it's hundreds of pages long, and it does have a lot of provisions that we've been fighting for years. So instance, it has automatic voter registration, right? That's something that we've been fighting for a really long time. Why is it that if you are a citizen, that they have your social security information, they have your birth date, that as soon as you turn 18, you're not just automatically added to the voter rolls? Why do we have to take this extra step of getting registered when we are eligible to vote, right? It's just another step. Every time they put a step between the voter and actually casting a ballot, that's an opportunity for people to fall out of the process. And so this would be a huge victory for democracy to ensure that everybody who is eligible, the second they turn 18, they're able to be added to the voter rolls without having to take additional opportunity to fill out a form or go to a website or meet someone at, a farmer's market with a clipboard, right? Of course, we love to do voter registration in the organization. So in some ways, we're working to put ourselves out of a job here, but there will be plenty of other things for us to do, even if every voter is automatically registered. The other things that it does is it actually adds a lot of transparency around campaign contributions. Obviously, money in politics is something that the League has been concerned about for a really long time. And so in addition to addressing some access issues with the actual process of voting, this bill also addresses some money in politics concerns around transparency and making sure that campaign contributions are kind of visible to the public, and that you can tell where money is coming from when candidates are running. And then the last thing is it also impacts redistricting and would actually create a national standard for redistricting. You recall a couple of years ago, there was a ruling out of North Carolina that held that there is no essentially federal protection in the court when you have a state that is essentially like blatantly gerrymandering for partisan political purposes. And I'm sorry, you just heard my little 2-year-old, so she might make an appearance on our talk here. But anyway, so a few years ago there was a North Carolina decision in which essentially the court ruled that yes, we can tell that this map was developed specifically for partisan political purposes, and no, we don't believe that there is a federal role or a federal judicial role in remedying that. And that's because we don't have a national redistricting standard, right? That those decisions are left to individual states. And so this would actually create some standardized redistricting criteria, which would be of benefit to everyone. So where are these things? And also 2 additional pieces of legislation that we're following. Obviously, the Equal Rights Amendment is something that we've been working on for years. Finally, we've gotten enough states to ratify the ERA, but there's my daughter. A few years ago, well, not a few years ago, many years ago, Congress had set a time limit on how long it could take for states to ratify. There were 3 states that never ratified within that time limit. Since then, enough states have ratified, but that time limit is still in existence. And so we're working on a congressional remedy for that. And also on the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which would essentially restore the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and specifically the pre-clearance requirement, which if folks have questions about that, we can talk about that later. We are also advocating for filibuster reform. It's actually something that we've been working on since 2011. So this is not an issue that's new to the league. But the things that we're talking about, we're not talking about completely ending the filibuster, but there is a history of filibuster abuse. And specifically, I think when people think about the filibuster, they think about Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and this idea that, you know, you have US senators who are like standing on the floor, talking for hours and hours and hours to kill time in order for a bill, you know, not to pass, right? What's really happening now in the US Senate is that people kind of under the cover of like electronic communication, basically just click a button to say that they are wanting to filibuster this specific legislation, and everything else that the Senate is doing keeps moving, right? Which means that it's really easy to filibuster. There's like no cost to the party or person who is filing the filibuster. Therefore, it's just easily used to say, don't want to talk about that. Nope, don't want to deal with voting on that issue. Nope, not interested, right? And so essentially you've created a process in which, as you all in Virginia know, right, that issues can just be swept under the rug, even when they're of critical importance to the American people. And so for instance, right, the filibuster is now being used as a way to block both the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, as well as the ERA, as well as the For the People Act. And so we are, as an organization, saying, look, government needs to be able to function, and people need to be able to talk about issues, and their elected officials need to talk about issues that they're concerned about. Meanwhile, we're also working on redistricting in our 50-state People-Powered Fair Maps campaign, which is essentially a way to work within the existing state frameworks, whether that be through statewide, state-level legislation, or a state constitutional amendment, or creating a statewide redistricting commission, right? Like whatever that state can allow to implement fairer states within our redistricting context across the country. For those states that already have like really solid redistricting procedures, we're kind of wrapping those states into the effort at the congressional level to try to help us get HR 1 passed. And then the last thing is just a note about nonpartisanship. The League continues to be fiercely nonpartisan. We are incredibly committed to not endorsing candidates, not endorsing political parties. We think that a lot of our strength as an organization comes from the fact that we're nonpartisan. But we do have to be honest about the fact that lately, right, there seems to be a more natural alliance in some ways with the platforms of some parties over others. And when we're being challenged about that, what we say is that, look, we've been where we are for decades, right? It's the parties that's moving. It's not us as an organization. We're basing a lot of our advocacy on positions and studies that we did back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, right? And so we're not going to change what we think is the right thing to do and what we've studied and what we've looked at and what we've decided. We're not going to change those things just because the parties are moving around. So we want to acknowledge that these are our positions. They didn't come from a partisan background or a partisan intent, but that we want to encourage every elected official, regardless of their party affiliation, to understand why we have these positions and encourage them to follow suit, right? Like, it's not our goal to speak against a specific party or speak on behalf of a specific party or a candidate, but we want to get everybody to understand that these are not and should not be partisan issues. Frankly, these are American issues. These are democratic values that people should hold regardless of what party they're elected to represent. And we're not gonna be cowed by folks who just say, oh, well, you're just partisan. Well, we're standing up for these issues because they're right, and we encourage them to join us. So with that being said, I am happy. I'm going to stop my screen sharing so we can go back to seeing everybody on the screen, and then I'm happy to take questions or however you all want to structure this part of the conversation.
Jessica, this is Suzanne. This is the first time we meet in person. We've communicated quite a bit. Suzanne Ellsbury. Thank you so much for your most enlightening and entertaining presentation. You've given us so much to think about, a lot of vital information and food for thought about the activities of the National League and the copious events that are facing our country right now. I will dive right in with the interview, some of which is compiled from pre-submitted questions by our members. Let's begin with combating disinformation. It's been observed that in America's past, tendencies towards hyper-vigilant, alarmist, and absolutist beliefs characterized only a minority of people. However, according to historian Richard Hofstadter, these propensities have, quote, now come to undergird much of American politics. So our question is, how can the League maintain its watchfulness and use social media to combat the disinformation peddlers and conspiracy theorists who threaten our very democracy?
Yeah, so that's of course an important question. And I think from an advocacy perspective, we at LWVUS should be calling on social media companies to institute better algorithms, better, frankly, policing of their own platforms to ensure that disinformation doesn't get disseminated as rapidly. But then I think what we can do just as ourselves in the kind of practice of, our own day-to-day social media activities as either individuals or as, the League, is actually not to refute bogus claims, right? Because we feel like that, oh, well, I just saw this link and here's why it's wrong, right? But when you do that, you're actually kind of putting the message out there even a little bit more. And so someone might see the article that you're linking to, and even though your comment or your post about the article explains why the article is wrong, it's actually still sharing that link and disseminating the bad information. And so one of the things that we really can do as individuals and as the league is focus on getting out good information. And so when you see like misinformation about, for example, an election date, don't share the bad date and say, no, it's not this date, right? Share a totally different link that says, here are the election dates that you need to know, right? Just put it out there in a positive, proactive way and try to get each other to share, you know, like those posts. Like, we kind of need to flood as much as we can the positive information rather than calling attention to the bad information, even though that's our instinct. Would be to call it out, you know, but actually the best thing to do is to try to kind of ignore it so that it dies down and doesn't get as many engagements.
Right, like Bill Gates is not planting microchips in people that are getting vaccines.
Yeah, do not share an article about that.
Okay, moving on to preventing voter suppression. That's something that's in all our minds right now. Currently, legislators in no fewer than 47 of our 50 states are sponsoring anti-voting laws. In fact, the Brennan Justice Center reports that since January to May of this year, at least 14 states have enacted 22 new laws restricting voter access, and at least 18 state legislatures have enacted or attempting to enact measures allowing for legal manipulation of the administration and counting of votes. Tuesday, President Biden called such attempts an unprecedented assault on voting. Could you comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think this type of situation is exactly why we need the For the People Act, right? We need some national standards that protect the rights of voters to access elections fairly, and also to ensure that elections occur, that elections are administered in a way that is fair, transparent, above board. You know, there are some states that don't require a verifiable paper trail of elections, right? That's something that would be required. So when you do an audit, you actually do have a way to go back and count the physical votes. Right, here we are, I'm in Florida, so I mean, election audits are something that we unfortunately know a lot about. We do have a requirement in Florida that there be a verifiable paper trail. That wasn't actually passed until 2007. And so we went through the 2000 election in Florida without that requirement, right? And then there were some electronic, there was actually a recount that was needed in a precinct that was essentially all the votes were counted on a like a paperless touchscreen election machine, and they weren't able to audit the results, right? And so unless you have a verifiable paper trail, how would you do that? So things like that are frankly just common sense approaches to ensuring that you can reliably ascertain who won the election. That should be a given. And you know, I do think that there's an opportunity for us as the league. We are credible messengers when you talk about election integrity, and we don't think that you have to sacrifice access in the name of integrity. And we also don't want to sacrifice integrity in the name of access. You can have both. So you can have an election system. I mean, we are living in the 21st century, right? You can have an election system that is transparent, that is accessible, that is reliable, that is trusted by everybody, without there being this kind of give or take and false choice about integrity versus access. And so I think that's something that we as an organization need to make sure that we're really getting that message out there, that this is a false choice, that like you have to make it hard for people to vote in order to protect the election. You know, I mean, really what they're trying to do is make it harder for certain people to vote, and we need to call them out on that. But you also can have a very, reliable and safe and secure election system in which eligible voters are easily able to cast their vote without experiencing undue obstacles.
We have to move on. We're under the time gun here. The ERA and the filibuster are two issues of concern. And you spoke about the filibuster and the ERA. We have a bipartisan majority of 52 senators supporting the removal of the time limit on the ratification of ERA. In your opinion, does the McConnell-led filibuster threaten our efforts to secure this vote?
Oh, definitely, definitely. I mean, I think that the fact that it's so easy to filibuster and that you can essentially do it behind closed doors, right? I mean, it's one thing to say, I'm going to filibuster and I'm going to stand on the Senate floor for hours and hours and hours, and I'm going to explain to the American people why I think this particular legislation is an issue. And I'm going to make all of my fellow senators, you know, like fall asleep while I do this, right? But it's another thing to just kind of be able to just do it with a click of a mouse and then go about your business and never have to give any explanation for why you're doing it, right? So if you're going to stand there and tell the American people that you don't think that women are entitled to equality of rights under the Constitution, then I want to hear what I want to hear why. And I think your voters would be interested in hearing why you feel that way. And I think especially the 51% of women who live in your district would be interested in why. And so I think we need to put folks on the spot. That's why they were elected, is to represent us. And if they're not doing that, then at least we're entitled to an explanation.
Thank you. Thank you. The following question on healthcare was posed by one of our action teams on healthcare. Once LWVUS adopts positions and issues for emphasis, what determines the specific legislation worthy of advocacy or lobbying by the League? For example, after the adoption of the 1993 healthcare position, what individuals or process determined that LWVUS would lobby for the ACA, and how will future healthcare reform legislation be evaluated? I know that's a lot.
Yes. So the League does have a position, a long-held position, advocating for universal access to quality, affordable care. And so there's a lot of different ways that you could potentially achieve universal access to quality, affordable care. The ACA was one way to achieve that end, maybe not the best way, right? Like that's up in the air about that. But what our general position at National is that anything that falls under what we call the Making Democracy Work platform, which is kind of our bread and butter of voting rights, redistricting, campaign finance reform, good governance, ethics, ethics in government, those types of issues that really fall under that kind of democracy umbrella. We are always engaged in those. No matter what, like we will drop anything to work on those issues. If it's an issue that we usually call them our watchdog issues, right? So healthcare, climate change, environmental policy, reproductive rights, issues that we have taken positions on, that we know that our members care about, right? But that are somewhat outside of our kind of core Making Democracy Work platform. We will basically monitor those issues. And if something comes up in Congress for which we think we can actually make a substantive impact, and there's an opportunity to make a substantive impact, we will weigh in and kind of lend resources. But if there's not an opportunity because there's not something that's moving, or we might weigh in, but it's not really going to change the narrative at all, then that's kind of a strategic decision to keep our powder dry for our primary kind of bread and butter Making Democracy Work campaign platform. And so we really have, we have an awesome national staff, like they're truly amazing. And they're always looking at what's happening on the Hill. And we also sign on to a lot of kind of coalition letters, and we sit at a lot of different coalition tables. And so they're mindful and they're looking for opportunities for us to engage, but we don't just want to be just kind of shooting like without a real target, right? It needs to be something that where we feel like there's the opportunity to make a strategic impact. And when we can, we will. And so when the ACA was being drafted, we were heavily involved at that point because that was a major legislative lift, and there was an opportunity for us to make an impact. Over the last several years, perhaps there wasn't as much of an opportunity to engage on healthcare, other than, frankly, in a defensive way to help be among those voices who were calling to preserve the ACA, if that makes sense.
So you all have a huge challenge. But we'll close with a question on preserving the League's nonpartisan reputation and polarization. The League is nonpartisan, yet not neutral. We take strong positions on initiatives and issues. How does the League maintain political neutrality when one party supports limitations on voting rights? And you kind of addressed this before, but I'd like to just finish up with that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just have to reiterate that we do not endorse political parties or candidates. We never have, as far as I know, we never will, right? And that we invite members of every party to join us in defending voting rights. That we don't believe that the right to vote should be a partisan issue, and that if it's becoming a partisan issue, that's really more a reflection on the folks who are making it a partisan issue than on us as an organization. And we just, we can't stray from that, because that's our, our reason for existence, is to be an advocate for voting and for voters, and to get more people, more eligible people involved in the process.
Yeah, like you said, we haven't changed. Yeah. Jessica, thank you again for an amazing interview and presentation, and for making our annual meeting so very memorable. It was an honor to have you. I hope you'll visit us again, and the audience may express their appreciation by going to the reaction bar and clicking on the applause icon. Thank you. And now I give you back to our president, Delores.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for taking time from your children to be with us this evening, and to alerting us about the ongoing work of the National League, which of course trickles down to us on the local and state level. And Suzanne, thank you for those insightful questions you asked. So we're going to move on. And Jessica, feel free to exit whenever you please. Thank you so much. We don't want to hold you. Okay, everybody. It is now 6:34 p.m. and I call the 2021 annual meeting of the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg to order. Our bylaws state that a quorum of 10% of our membership must be present in order to vote. Our current league membership is 223. Will the members present raise your hands? Margaret Fritz is our acting secretary. Margaret, once you have a count, please announce the number of members present.
Delores, we have 44 members present.
Thank you very much, Margaret. We have more than the required quorum. As our first order of business, we will adopt the annual meeting rules, which were emailed to you earlier and which are on the screen before you now. These are the rules which will govern this meeting. Only league members are allowed to debate, make motions, and vote. Are there any objections to the rules? Hearing none, the rules are adopted. We must now approve last year's meeting minutes. which were also emailed to you. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Okay, at this point, I will need to give you my State of the League address, which I will pull up on the screen, and as soon as I have it, we will start. There are always difficulties when we are on Zoom. Okay, here we go. Good evening again. Tonight, my term as president of the Charlotte League ends. When I came into office, my primary goal was to provide stability to an organization that was experiencing turmoil after resignations by the president and the board members who followed her. 5 years in, I can say I accomplished that goal. And I leave you in the capable hands of 2 co-presidents who will give you double your money's worth. I look forward to their leadership. My second goal was to bring increased visibility to the Charlotte League. I remember standing uptown on the steps of First United Methodist Church, watching marchers in the Martin Luther King Jr. Parade in January 2017. I saw many community organizations walking, but no league. I decided then and there that we should take part in as many parades as possible, and we did. Not only in the MLK Jr. Parade, but the St. Patrick's Day Parade, the Pride Parade, and the Labor Day Parade, proudly riding in Beth Springstone's silver convertible. Parades were hard work for us, but they paid off in much needed visibility. Further, I arranged to speak about the League's work before as many groups as possible. Highlights of my first year included presenting at the Tuesday Morning Forum, speaking at the first Charlotte Women's March, and sitting for a profile interview for Charlotte Magazine. I spoke before such disparate groups as the Aldersgate Retirement Community, the Daughters of the American Revolution, the Mint Hill Women's Club, a delegation of young African women visiting the International House, students at Central Piedmont Community College, WFAE Radio, and countless other gatherings. I emphasized the League's history and our passionate commitment to voting rights. Large high schools like Independence and West Charlotte received my attention as well, as I worked to involve them in our high school voter registration drives. In-house, we began to regularly send voter newsletters to members and elected officials. We created a new website to increase our presence on social media. We achieved 501c3 status, so dues and donations are all tax deductible. We moved to 2 yearly Civics 101 classes instead of 1. Our Lunch with the League, featuring speakers of note, continued, and we instituted League Talk in the evening for members and guests who work during the day. At those meetings, I always asked new members and guests to introduce themselves, a feature they seemed to enjoy. One of the proudest moments of my presidency took place during the 2018 midterm elections. I brought together a coalition of 15 women's organizations to conduct candidate forums focused on women's issues. To my knowledge, our league had never had such a large group of nonprofit women's organizations together in such a fashion. It was a first. For the past 2 years, we have partnered with Friendship Missionary Baptist Church's Social Justice Committee to decrease the numbers of appearances candidates must make. Perhaps the biggest accomplishment of my presidency was leading our league and celebrating the 100th anniversary of the founding in 1920 of both the National and Charlotte League and the right of women to vote. We had planned a gala for February 29, 2020, and barely escaped the nationwide COVID-19 pandemic shutdown. We achieved the goal of improving our finances, earning a record $30,000 after expenses to enhance the work of the league. If I were to create a scrapbook of league memories, I would have to include not just pictures of the aforementioned, but also attendance at exhausting National League conventions, attendance at the demonstration at the US Supreme Court's hearing of the North Carolina versus Rucho gerrymandering case, and the scrumptious meals and camaraderie we served up at Christmas holiday parties and annual meetings. And finally, we received so many requests from groups who wanted to help us celebrate the 100th anniversary of the league and that right of women to vote. Video links to those appearances would be in that scrapbook as well. The success of our league lies squarely at the feet of our board, action team chairs, and members who work tirelessly to make our programs work. We collaborate with like-minded organizations to assure we are fulfilling our duty to inform ourselves and the public about issues that affect our lives. We strongly advocate for policies that improve the lives of all people and not just a few. We have a new diversity, equity, and inclusive team, which I hope will bring new members, new ideas, and new perspectives to a maturing league that still maintains a sterling reputation. There is still so much work for us in the league to do when it comes to combating voter suppression and the right turn this country has taken. We have, however, seen a new awakening to the rights and reparations needed for those who have never achieved the American dream of prosperity due to racism, prejudice, and terrorism. But I have faith that justice and humanity will rise up to defeat the enemies of the democracy we seek. And I am elated to say the state of our league is just fine. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Madam President, I would like to be recognized.
I recognize Suzanne Ellsbury.
Thank you. Good evening. In 2014, as membership chair, I welcomed Delores Johnson Hurt to her first league meeting. Having been a talent manager in one of my past lives, I had an intuitive eye for observing the potential in people I'd meet. It was immediately clear to me that Delores was special. It was not just her distinctive appearance, tall, impeccably groomed, and exuding an unmistakable flair that ignited my attention. After conversing with this intellectual, self-assured, and talented woman, I was sure that she was the person the league needed, and I lost no time in encouraging her to become a member. Truth be told, I bugged her shamelessly, and to our ultimate benefit, she agreed. Leaping forward 7 years, we are here tonight honoring Dolores's outstanding 5 years as our league president and the impressive contributions she has made to our organization and community. There's not time to mention her numerous awards and accolades, but honestly, she has racked them up. And about the only one she's missing is the Nobel Prize. Our current membership chair, Margaret Howe Soper, tells me she credits our impressive growth in membership in large part to Dolores's efforts towards increasing our visibility with the public and the media through participation in televised debates, parades, rallies, press interviews, and addresses to civic organizations. In 2015-16, when she became president to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg League, we had 123 members. Today, we can boast of having a diversified membership of over 223 members. Congratulations to Delores and the hardworking and dedicated boards she's led. As a personal friend and colleague, I have traveled and been roommates with Delores at several league conferences, co-chaired with her at many league events, and served as her co-editor of the Suffragette newsletter. I've also served on the steering committee she directed for our successful 100th anniversary gala. So, from my observation at such an up-close and personal point, I can truly attest for her professionalism and remarkable leadership. Recently, during National Women's History Month, both of us had a chance to indulge our mutual passion for women's rights and suffrage by depicting a celebrated woman in an AAUW program. Delores gave a stunning portrayal of Maya Angelou in her colorful costume, replete with agility and large gold hoop earrings. Maya Angelou, a beloved African-American feminist, civil rights activist, and poet, composed her memorable poem, Phenomenal Woman, in 1978. And I want to share the closing lines of which actually puts me in mind of my friend Delores. Now you understand just why my head's not bowed. I don't shout or jump about. When you see me passing, it ought to make you proud. I say it's in the click of my heels, the bend of my hair, the palm of my hand, the need for my care. 'Cause I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me. So now I have the distinct honor to present this award from a grateful League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and the dedication reads, Delores Johnson Hurt, in appreciation for your distinguished leadership as President 2016-2021. And now I give you this phenomenal woman, Delores Johnson Hurt.
Wow, Suzanne, thank you so much, my friend.
Welcome, my friend.
That's such a beautiful award. I don't think I've ever seen one like it. And it will certainly hold a place of honor in my home And everyone who enters it shall see it, and I'll happily point it out as well. So thank you, Suzanne.
For you.
Oh, really? Thank you. And thank you, of course, to the board of directors who have been encouraging and whose work really needs to be applauded during my 5 years as president of the league. And they will continue, of course, to push the league forward. And we expect to see more great things from our board and from the members and our donors as well. So thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, at this time, we'll have reports from our board members and action team members, action team leaders in the order listed on the program. We'll begin first with the membership and environment reports from Margaret House Soper.
We can't hear Margaret. I think she's still muted.
I thought we were going to be done on automatic. I'll start again. I have 6 points to make and I'll make them quickly. We have 233 members in the league. The board voted to reduce student dues from $30 to $0. We do ask that students tell us from which institution they are enrolled. Number 3, we need a new membership chair who will get out into the communities. Peg Chapin and I will continue on the membership committee, and I will continue as roster keeper if the new membership chair desires. Number 4, we hope to have an orientation for new members sometime this summer. Number 5, membership renewal notices will be going out in July, so we hope to get you members to renew your membership. And if you change your contact information, please let the league know so that you will continue to receive our notices. And that concludes my membership report. And now on to environment. The environment team was organized in January 2019, worked for a year, but from March 2020 to January 21 took a COVID-19 break. In January 2021, we renewed our investigations of local and regional environmental issues that were impacted by climate change. We have advocated for changes in environmental policies and practices that support public health, economic development, water and air quality, and especially good planning that accommodates all of the above. For the coming year, we plan to continue our investigations, advocating with the public and elected officials, and our continued mission of educating the public by providing an annotated list on the League's webpage of public and private organizations concerned with environmental issues. Margaret Fritz will be the lead co-chair in the 2021-22 year. And that concludes the environmental report. And now I would like to introduce Jean Smith.
Hello, I'm Jean Smith, co-chair of the education team with John Lee. The education works so that all children and youth in our community and state receive a good public education, which allows them to reach their full potential. This year, the major areas of focus are equitable access to education and adequate public education funding. For equity, locally, the effort for equity involves understanding the disparities in education, such as achievement gap, access to experienced teachers, access to resources such as the internet. We worked with the school board members and the CMS Community Equity Committee. At the state level, the equity focus addresses the unmet constitutional requirement for a sound basic education as defined by the Leandro court case. For funding, good public education must be adequately funded. We work to understand and influence funding by the Mecklenburg County Commissioners and the North Carolina legislators. Our advocacy activities this year included organizing 4 webinars, meeting and sending letters to elected officials, and producing reports on school finance in North Carolina, opportunity scholarship, and broadband. These are available on the team webpage. To do this work, we collaborated with local and state allied organizations and the league education teams across the state. Thank you. I would like to now introduce Reagan A. Duddell.
Hi, I'm Reagan A. Duddell, and I am the Chair of Voter Services. But before I go any further, there would be no voter services without all of the volunteers and the volunteers that were able to help pivot and have us such a good presence during the COVID epidemic. So thank you. We have several areas that we focus on. And first, the USCIS, as we all know, in March, we got shut down. They reopened in May and wanted to know how we could still participate. Arts and Crafts was born. Lita Bosk and I met in my backyard. We highlighted over 1,000 forms and put together packets. And they had instructions and a voter registration form and absentee ballot requests and vote 411 and the ubiquitous I registered to vote sticker. And we took them to the USCIS, and we've been doing that monthly. As a matter of fact, we just dropped off 1,000 for the month of June. USCIS is starting to open up a little bit, so we're hoping that we can have a physical presence in the next month or two. We're not quite sure how that'll look, but it was really important that we maintain contact with them. For the community, we had a lot of events planned. Clearly that had to change, and the volunteers again stepped up. We assembled packets that we put in food banks. We went to census parades. We went to different community events. I hung around on a street corner by a brewery as people drove up to pick their beer up. I was able to hand out packets. We also sent things out digitally. In the fall, we were lucky enough to be able to be out in the community, and we had 47 registered voter registration events at the Enlivian communities, and we did those with the census so that we were able to both register voters and make sure folks got participated in the census. We did all the roof above campuses, and we even walked Tent City. We were able to help find some rides for folks to get to the polls later on. We had folks walking crisis assistance every day up until the end of early voting registration. So because of the volunteers, we were able to really still participate and get folks registered. In high schools, we had some wonderful events early on. It was a little more difficult, but we did host several virtual voter registration events in the fall. And we have some great things planned for next year. And not only did we do voter registration, but as we all know, it was the 100th anniversary. We've done a lot with CPCC, and they'd asked us to design a program to teach the students about the history of the 100th anniversary. And we were able to present that on March 3rd, which was, I believe, the last day of voting for the primary. And it was also the 107th anniversary of Alice Paul's March in Washington. So it was kind of a good day. Luckily, we got it in. And once everything was shut down, we really hated to let that go. So with the help of 2 of our members, Charles and Mary Love, we were able to turn it into a video, which was used at the Levine Museum of the New South for one of their events. It was used at CPCC and several other locations to continue to teach about the 100th anniversary. So it is now on the League's YouTube website or YouTube page, if anyone would like to go see it. Going forward, we are going to continue our voter registration, but we really want to start educating people on the importance of local elections. We need to get out and let people know that it's the local elections that are really going to impact their lives. So we're looking at doing some different civics programs for high schools and some of our partners. So that should be exciting. And we will continue to follow the General Assembly and look for voter ID or any new voting laws that are coming up and let you know. So again, thank you, and thanks to all the volunteers. None of this would have happened without them. And I'd now like to introduce Karen Bean.
Thank you. I'm Karen Bean with the Healthcare Action Team, and I hope you were able to attend the League talk in January on the topic of the pandemic, health inequities, and reckoning with racism, because this, in a nutshell, explains the urgency of re-energizing a healthcare team. Because healthcare is a topic that's broader than local action, the committee operates a little bit differently, and we worked over the last year to connect with other League healthcare teams in North Carolina and across the United States to collaborate on 4 specific areas: Medicaid expansion, improved Medicare for all, social determinants of health, and the influence of racism on healthcare. Be on the lookout for an upcoming communication on racism as a public health crisis, which touches on the history of healthcare in the United States and why this is important now. And please let me know if you're interested in this topic. And now I'd like to introduce Linda Levy.
Hello, I don't know if you'll be able to see me. My computer isn't working right. But anyway, I am speaking on behalf of Tom Murdoch, who chaired Civics 101 so ably. Due to the pandemic and the impact on access to the government center, Civics 101 did not have a 2020 fall session or 2021 spring session. We did consider virtual sessions, but when the attendees were surveyed, their responses indicated that they would rather wait for a live session where the interaction with fellow attendees and with the speakers made the sessions worthwhile. We do expect to resume Civics 101 for a 2021 fall session. Of course, this depends upon the government center, courthouse, and the Charlotte Observer being available. We continue to maintain a waiting list for the next full session. 41 are now signed up for a class of 60. However, we know from past experience that many on the waiting list will not register. I would like to thank Civics 101 team members Ashley Guzman, Therese Kelly, Stephen Nader, and June White for the stick-to-itiveness during this pandemic. However, the team is in need of a team leader. Due to serious medical conditions for my wife and me, I have resigned from my Civics 101 director role. We are looking for someone to take over. There is a lot of satisfaction in helping session attendees learn more about local government, and for some, become an entry into political life. Former Mayor Jennifer Roberts and North Carolina Senator Joyce Waddell are 2 of several former attendees of Civics 101. And I would like to now introduce Kate Stadelman.
Thank you, Linda. My name is Kate Stadelman. I am chair of the Women's Issues Action Team. I want to tell you about it and invite you to join us. This past fiscal year, the team worked on the gender pay gap locally. The rate of progress on this challenging issue has been slowed by COVID-19's disparate impact on women's employment. The League is a founding member of the local Coalition for Pay Equity. This fiscal year, the team and the coalition will work together to get the commitment of 8 major local employers to examine their pay policies and practices, to collect and analyze company data on gender pay equity, and remediate any identified gaps. We plan to encourage these companies by creating and publicizing a gender equity scorecard. We have decided to score the companies on measures from a group that supports the adoption and use of a standard set of metrics to measure diversity in organizations. 3 metrics that we will track are the percentage of female representation on the organization's board, the percentage of female representation by employee category, and the female to male ratio of compensation, that is equal pay for equal work. We have added a 4th indicator from the Global Reporting Initiative called Wage Level, which asks the companies to compare their entry-level wage by gender to the local minimum wage. We are asking you to join our team. We need everyone, but we especially need you if you have knowledge of metrics and measurement to help us design the scorecard. This is such a vital part of pushing major local employers toward gender pay equity. You can reach me by going to our website and selecting Women's Issues on the Contact Us page. Now we will hear from Harry Taylor and Linda Levy again.
After the COVID-19 stress 2020 census, we've arrived finally at 2021, which is a redistricting year. The majority party in the North Carolina legislature will soon draw maps that are intended to last for the next decade. But if history of the past 30 years is instructive, we're likely to see lawsuits filed before the ink is dry on the new maps. In February, we did 2 Zoom redistricting presentations to our league. They have done similar presentations to 4 other times, including one I just got off of before I got on this call. I spent a really busy 4 months with an organization called The People in Michigan, and a woman by the name of Katie Fahey. They accomplished what we dream of in Michigan, the space between 2016 and 2020, when they were able to get a constitutional amendment passed to create a citizens redistricting committee in Michigan. Is exactly what we want here in North Carolina. We're hoping some of their magic would rub off on us. And we had a very successful convening of multi-partisan individuals on the 15th of March. But we really find that there's a little more that we can do that isn't already underway. Linda? Linda's.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. On Thursday, April 29th, the League of Women Voters North Carolina Fair Districts Day of Action, using the excellent toolkit provided by Harry Taylor, league members and others, made calls to the 4 leading House and Senate legislators and sent emails to the 34 members of the House and Senate Redistricting Committee, which Harry had suggested. It's not too late to contact legislators. If you wish, I can forward Harry Taylor's toolkit memo to you. Harry is willing to make presentations to as many groups, and I already told Harry I've got 2 more lined up for him, to as many groups as possible to show legislators that North Carolinians are watching the redistricting process.
So presently we're working with Wake County's Jennifer Bremer, who a number of you know, her initiative Fair Counties, North Carolina, and we're holding a Zoom presentation on the 17th to plan how to best pressure the Board of County Commissioners, the City Council of Charlotte, and the school board to establish an open, nonpartisan participatory procedure for the county, for their particular maps, which are also going to be drawn this year. So we're trying to bring the redistricting process, which always ends up in gerrymandering, down to a local level. So look for an invitation the next 2 days for the June 17th event. Now I'd like to introduce Cindy Moore.
Hi, this is Cindy. We had a really good year this year, considering the fact that COVID was upon us. We received 2 major contributions, one for $25,000 and one for just over $3,000, which gave us an over budget of $27,000. Our dues were down just a little bit. Civics 101, we had to refund some money only because they had canceled the program. Other than that, our expenses were way down due to COVID. Since a lot of the places were closed, meetings were in person or were not in person. We did have a lot of mailings that went out, so those went up. Our grants are down just a little bit. We still have over 19,000 in our 100th anniversary fund. Our new citizens registration grant is over by 1,800. And that is it.
I'm sorry. All right, thank you, Cindy. From time to time, we find we need to revise our bylaws. Please welcome now, again, Kate Stadelman to discuss several recommendations.
Good evening again. I wanted to point out to everyone that our bylaws are always available on the league website under the About Us section. And also that the proposed changes are included in their completeness in the voter newsletter. So I'm going to summarize for us this evening because we need to vote on these. The first change is in Article 2, the Purposes and Policy section. And it's the addition of a section for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion policy. We've had this as a policy before, but this is putting it into our bylaws, stating our full commitment. The second section is membership, and this we have simplified. We no longer have voting members and non-voting members. Everybody who subscribes to our purpose and policies and is 16 years of age can be a member. And we are adding a definition of students so that we can be clear about what a student is. And those are individuals enrolled either full or part-time within an accredited institution. Putting it here gives us the flexibility in the dues that we charge, as Margaret Hausoper mentioned. Then Article 4 is about our officers. For the section on the president, we are talking about which meetings the president will preside at. So we have a lot of meetings. He or she is not required to participate in all of them, although they are an ex officio member, but they are required to preside at all meetings of the board and of course the annual meeting. And then there's a statement about signing contracts. The secretary is similar. The bylaws before were a little bit unclear. The secretary is not required to attend all meetings and create minutes for all of those, but for the meetings of the board of directors and the annual meeting. Madam Chair, I move that we accept the bylaw changes.
Madam Chair, I second the motion.
Thank you, Carolyn. Are there any objections to the changes in the bylaws? Hearing none, all who approve, please raise your digital hand. And we'll wait to hear the count from our Communications Director, Vashti Hurt.
$25 in favor.
Any opposed?
No opposed.
Thank you. The bylaws are approved. Now, John Lee, Chair of the Budget Committee, will present his report.
Thank you, Dolores. The full budget is in the voter, which you've had a chance to review, I hope, and we're going to have it up on the screen here in a minute. But let me touch on some of the highlights of our plan for next year. The proposed budget recommends spending $32,400 with income estimated to be $21,850. This will require $10,550 above our income. As Cindy pointed out, we have underspent our current year, and we received an unanticipated contribution of $25,000 last year. We plan to move these funds, or some of these funds, forward, the $10,550 forward to close the gap in the proposed budget. The extra spending will largely go to increases for membership, committee, and voter services. By expanding our membership, we will increase our revenue, and voter services are a critical core function, especially in this year of the league. The goal is to increase membership and expand our efforts to register new voters. And the budget assumes that we will reestablish in-person events later this year, probably in September, which will increase both expenses and income. This deficit spending is a one-year option and cannot be suspended at this level in the future. Madam Chair, I move for approval of the 2021-2022 budget.
Is there a second?
We have a second in the chat from Connie Green Johnson.
Okay. Thank you very much, Connie. Are there points of discussion about the budget? Hearing none, I ask that you vote by raising your hand.
We have 26 raised hands.
Any opposition?
I see no opposition.
Thank you so much. The 2021-2022 League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg's budget is approved. I now call on Director Carolyn Lyons to present our proposed local program and recommended areas of focus for 2021-2022.
Thank you, President Johnson Hurt. The League's program consists of those governmental issues that the League has chosen over the years for concerted study and action at the local level. State and National League studies and consensus are considered at their respective conventions and are applicable for each local league to act on as well. As specified in the bylaws, at each annual meeting, members are asked to adopt the program consisting of issues on which league members have reached a consensus. Positions must be readopted each year by league members at the annual meeting in order to remain on the program of issues for possible action. Our local positions are generally under the headings of government, education, healthcare reform, environment and global climate change, transportation, social policy, housing, human trafficking. The vote includes accepting the following areas of focus for action teams. Voter services, with emphasis on voter education and registration, ending gerrymandering and voter suppression, and promoting vote411.org. Healthcare reform, support for Medicaid expansion and Medicare for all, studying social determinants of health and the influence of racism in healthcare systems. Public education, support for public education with equitable and timely funding, equitable access to quality education, accountability for schools receiving opportunity scholarship funding, access to broadband internet for all students. Environment, investigating the local and regional environmental landscape with special attention to where we can advocate for policies impacted by climate change on air, water, economic development, and public health. Women's issues, supporting the ERA and wage equity. And diversity, equity, and inclusion, increasing publicity for our league in the community and solicitation of new and more diverse members. This concludes the recommended program for 2021-2022.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. As this program has been moved by the board, a second is not needed. May I hear if there are any objections to our recommended program for 2021-2022? 2021-2022. Hearing no objections, the program is approved. Finally, tonight, we have a new slate of officers and directors. Donna Armbruster, Chair of the Nominating Committee, will present their recommendations.
Yes, Dolores. I'm waiting for the screen to come. I apologize. My Zoom camera is not working well, so you don't see me, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, here we go. This is the proposed slate of officers for 2021 through 2023. For officers, there are co-presidents 2021 through 2023, Reagan Adodell and Suzanne Ellsbury. First Vice President 2021 through 2023, Linda Levy. Second Vice President 2021 through 2022, Vashti Hurt. She's filling an unexpired term. For Secretary 2021 through 2023, Susan B. Harden. Treasurer 2021 through 2022, Cindy Moore. She's also filling an unexpired term. Directors, Carol Lyons, 2021 through 2023. Kate Stellman, 2021 through 2023. And Shonda Martin, 2021 through 2023. The nominating committee for 2021 through 2022, myself, Donna Armbruster, I will be the nominating chairperson again next year. Members being Delores Johnson Hurt and a member Ann Wood. Continuing for the last year of their term, directors John Lee, Lucille Howell, and June White. This is submitted by the 2020 and the 2021 nominating committee, members being Donna Armbruster, the chair, Patty Kelly, Sylvia Ross, Suzanne Ellsbury, who was appointed, and Kate Stadelman, who was appointed. Now that I presented the 2021-2022 proposed slate of officers, 2023 proposed slate of officers, I move that the complete slate as presented be approved. Dolores.
Thank you very much, Donna. Thank you to the nominating committee for, I know, what was a very difficult task, but I think we have a wonderful slate. Thank you for your motion, Donna. May I have a second to her motion?
I second the motion.
Thank you, Jean. Are there any nominations from the floor? Hearing no nominations, I ask that all those who approve our new slate of officers raise your hand.
We have a count of 30 raised hands.
Is there any opposition to the slate?
I see no opposition.
Thank you very much, and welcome new board members. Okay, folks, at this time, I relinquish my presidency to our new co-presidents, Suzanne Ellsbury and Reagan Adidell.
Thank you, Dolores. Now we have arrived at a time-honored time of our annual meeting, where members are invited to give directions to the new board. This can be direction to the local board or suggested programs or activities or direction you want passed along to the state or national league. Basically, these are your feelings about how the league operates, as well as development of programs or services. Due to the time constraints, however, of our Zoom platform, we request that you email your comments to me at dessuz, D-E-S-S-U-Z, @bellsouth.net. I assure you that your voice will be heard. You can also email them to Reagan at raduddell61@gmail.com. We will do everything we can to make sure that these are heard and passed along. It is my pleasure now to introduce former board members Tom Bowers and Margaret House Soper to acknowledge two of our very distinguished members. Tom, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Tom Bowers. I'm a former board member, as you've heard, on the co-chairs of education and nominations. I'm here to thank and to pay tribute to Tom Murdoch, who is retiring from the League of Women Voters Charlotte-Mecklenburg board after serving in various capacities for many years. When I joined the board, there was a leadership change that Tom led that brought us our outstanding chair, Delores Johnson Hurt. And Margaret House Soper worked with Tom Murdoch and Civics 101 and contributed to this tribute. Think of the strong silent type. That's Tom Murdoch, but with clear vision, strong values, and a solid work ethic. He was raised on a farm in upstate New York and proudly served his country. Tom demonstrates his belief in democracy, in support of civil rights, and registering new voters. Tom Murdoch also believes citizens need to understand who their local leaders are and how local government works. So he has led the League of Women Voters Charlotte-Mecklenburg Civics 101 for many years. It has grown under his leadership, and many current leaders got their start by attending Civics 101. Please join me in showing our appreciation to a civic star and a league leader, Tom Murdoch.
Hello, I'm Margaret House Soper. Our newest lifetime member is a woman who is smart, funny, generous of heart with her time, always full of questions, and thoroughly dedicated to good government and making democracy work. Linda Levy joined the Huntington, New York League of Women Voters in 1971 when her son went off to kindergarten. She read about the league in the local penny saver, where the league had an ad that it was holding a membership recruiting drive. What impressed Linda enough to get her to join was the quality of the studies that the local, state, and national leagues were undertaking on affordable housing, air quality, zoning, arms control, voting rights, and financing education. Sound familiar? As soon as Linda joined, she found herself on the board of directors in charge of publications. In those days, these publications were the main sources of information for league members to develop enough knowledge to make informed decisions for consensus building. Back in those days, Most members were young stay-at-home women with young children. At one time, Linda heard her 3-year-old daughter playing house, where her daughter was playing the mother, who did what mothers do, go to meetings. In the 70s were also a challenging time for the League. Some women left the League on positions over a women's right to choose to end a pregnancy. The idea of men being welcome in the League came as a shock to some people. There was a lot of discussion about whether or not to keep the name of the League of Women Voters. And we can report, and I can attest to this because I was in the League then too, that it came as a collective sigh of relief when the name stayed the same. Finally, the National League affirmed the policy that if a board member's spouse was elected to office, that board member was not prohibited from a League leadership position. When Linda moved to Charlotte in 1987, the first thing she did was to join this chapter of the League. Back then, the main studies were on land use, voting rights, the role of the federal government in setting education standards in grades K through 12. Linda found great satisfaction in voter services, being voter services chair, when the League could register naturalized citizens to vote right after they became citizens and involved every CMS high school in voter registration drives. Most recently, Linda has focused on the education team, studying equity, education funding and opportunities, and in private life, Linda still volunteers in local schools. We are very fortunate to have you, Linda. May you have many, many more happy and productive years with the League of Women Voters in Charlotte.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Tom and Margaret. And congratulations to Tom Murdoch and Linda Levy. Before we end, I'd like to make a few announcements. As we're continuing on with the work that each action team has talked about, we have some other things we're doing. One of which, under the tutelage of board member Carolyn Lyons, we are attempting to be the first state league in the United States to have a license plate. We've had one designed. We are getting ready to open a website where people can order the website or order the plate. It's a really cool looking plate. We will need to pre-order 500 before we can present it to the DMV. So look for that, talk it up. You don't have to be a league member. Another thing we're looking at in July is we've just entered the Adopt a Street program. What better streets to adopt than the ones around the Board of Elections? So in July, we will have our inaugural street cleaning party, and we hope to then retire to one of the local eateries to celebrate our cleanliness. So look for that announcement. That should be quite fun. In August, we're hoping to start a book club. There's so many books out there that we're reading, everyone's reading, and you get so much more out of listening to other people's opinions of these books. So again, we'll be putting information about that. And if you have ideas for books, send them our way. We're not sure of the venue yet, and we're hoping to do virtual and in person, whatever. Another thing is last year we had entered the Pride Parade, but that had been canceled. It's back up, so we think, and it will be in October this year. So we're already entered for the Pride Parade. So look for that information as well. And we will be doing another, I hope everyone saw our yard art last year, our vote sign. We'll be thinking of another yard art again this year. So those are some other things that we'll have going on in the league. And if no one has anything else, I think it's time to adjourn the 2021 annual meeting. Any objections? I don't think so. Okay, the annual meeting of the League of Women Voters is adjourned.